is my pleasure today to introduce our speakers for our last environmental roundtable. It's Joey Bro, and I had to write it down. Your title is one of the longest I've ever seen. Assistant Commissioner of the Office of Soil and Water and the Executive Director of the Louisiana Soil and Water Conservation Commission. And Jeremy Davenport, the Water Resource Specialist. I'm excited. I have known them both, and I have worked with them, and I'm very excited to have this talk today. And as with that, I will hand it over to you all.
Great. Great to be with y'all. My name is Joey Bro, and only one or the other of those titles need suffice, but a lot of people throw them in together because I always end up using them at the same time. But yes, Dr. Del Bianco and I go way back to her days. It seemed like as a student worker at the Audubon Institute, but yeah, long time ago, and have been working with Jerry for a while now. And he and I are going to just bump this back and forth, and he's going to handle a couple of programs in here that are going to be especially relevant to water, which is what I understand your concerns are here today. Water challenges and opportunities. And we certainly have those in Louisiana, and some of those challenges, at least from our mostly agricultural perspective, we'll try to highlight through some of the programs that we work with in our division. And here, as far as these challenges as they exist within the agricultural realm, I think they're the same everywhere, especially in Louisiana. They're going to be quality and quantity. And certainly ag has unfortunately contributed to some impairments, water quality impairments in this state. Some of them are outside the capacity of us to deal with in the programs that we have, but we can handle most of them, especially those of a non-point source or soil health and stability element. And we're going to look at that here in a little bit. And in these slides here, I would like to point out the one that you see middle right. 2 empty Gatorade jugs, one clear water, one cloudy. If you live in South Louisiana, you're part of an alluvial system. Water's going to be turbid naturally, but that varies according to a lot of conditions. Some of those conditions are induced. The turbid water comes out of a bayou, and actually it's Bayou Queue de Tortue in Acadia Parish. That bayou is the parish line between Acadia and Vermilion. Muddy water coming out of the bayou used to irrigate rice, flood irrigation. When the water is turned off the field after having irrigated that rice for the duration of its maturity, comes off the field clear there. So with all the rap, usually a bad one, that rice ag gets in the name of water quality, done right, it can actually do a lot to improve water quality through nutrient assimilation, sediment reduction, and that sort of thing. And the guy you see there dealing with his irrigation water discharge is doing the same thing, recycling irrigation water. He's one of our best conservation farmers. And these are some of the agencies that help make it happen. The Office of Soil and Water is probably the tiniest division within the Department of Ag and Forestry. Our might is in the field through the Soil and Water Conservation Districts. Wherever you are in the nation, you're within a Soil and Water Conservation District or whatever name they go by in that state. Here they're SWCDs. And they're represented by 5 local landowners or farmers who represent their peer land users within those areas. But still, their capacity to leverage resources to address conservation concerns, especially as they apply to water, are very limited. They don't have much money. So we partner with these people. The strongest and most historic of the partnership within the Conservation Partnership is with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. It used to be the Soil Conservation Service, goes back many, many years. All these others, CPRA, DU is an NGO, Louisiana Association of Conservation Districts, DEQ, and the LSU Ag Center provide lots of opportunity to grow conservation programs and help conservation to hit the ground in an ag setting. And planning, conservation planning is something that not a lot of people are familiar with. There's a lot that goes into it. It's easy to say, but there's a 9-element process that can be fairly intricate, and it's the basis, it's the root of the conservation efforts and conservation successes that we ultimately realize through our programs. And these are some of the things that the partnership as a whole brings: natural resources inventory and resource assessment. Again, sounds easy, but it's fairly intricate, and it's one of the first primary steps in getting conservation done. Research, technical and financial assistance, outreach and education has been a pretty prominent part of my conservation life, and those things are very important. Land user connection and trust. As long as you're delivering conservation programs in a voluntary manner, you got to get them to take the bait. They've got to come to you and want this. And first they have to know and trust the people that are interfacing between them and the agencies, usually large federal ones, that are providing the technical assistance. That's where those conservation districts play a key role. Then program implementation, monitoring and eval, and stewardship and sustainability. It's one thing to get conservation on the ground, but it's like sharpening your pencil. Just because you do it once doesn't mean you'll never have to do it again. It's got to be maintained. And these are the different programs we have. The State Soil and Water Conservation Commission oversees our statewide soil and water conservation district program, 44 of them in the state. EPA Clean Water Act, Section 319H, which deals with non-point source pollution. Most of you have heard about that. We take care of the Ag non-point source reduction program. Ag Solid Waste Management Program, that's grown a lot in recent years. It's always been big. We do that in concert with DEQ Solid Waste. Coastal Revegetation Program, it's what brought me to the agency 32 years ago. I'm a marsh rat. I love being out there, and CPRA is still funding that wonderful program. Ag and Marshland Prescribed Burner Certification Program, you're wondering how the heck does that help water quality? It can if done properly. We'll talk about that. Master Farmer Certification, we're the only state that does such a thing, and our farmers help make it happen. Conservation Info and Education and Outreach, Farm Bill Conservation Program Delivery Assistance, Watershed Planning, and special conservation projects and partnerships. There's our conservation districts. They're divided by law into 5 areas, and if you were to take EPA's ecoregions map of the state and overlay it on top of this, you would see a very strong correlation. Some bureaucrats made that map in 1938. They knew what they were doing. Like I said, it matches EPA's ecoregions map, and per area, in Area 1, that's tertiary uplands. That's where the bulk of Louisiana's poultry production occurs, with some row crop along the Red River alluvium. Area 2 is obviously Mississippi River alluvium, a lot of row crop there, a good many beef cattle. Area 3 is southern tertiary uplands. We've got a little bit of everything going on there. Area 4, obviously that's where the bulk of our rice and crawfish comes from, and it's a lot of beef cattle and cane grown there too, and some other row crops. Area 5, a lot of lush uplands and terraces, with most, if not all, of what's left of our dairy industry located there, with a lot of Mississippi River alluvium and deltaic wetlands as well. Now, regarding our historic partnership with EPA, a non-regulatory division of an otherwise regulatory agency to help us work with farmers to reduce non-point source pollution, I'll let Mr. Davenport introduce himself and talk about that program.
Hi there, Al. So this is one of the many programs that we work with in our office, Section 319, the Clean Water Act. With this program, we partner with our conservation districts, working with producers, working also with NRCS and DEQ. DEQ does the planning for impaired watersheds, doing water quality monitoring, seeing where we have impairments and what those impairments are, also where those impairments coming from. Once they kind of get that base data, they develop a plan, a watershed implementation plan. That then goes into our realm where we implement that plan. Most of this is going to be on ag land, where we are doing conservation practices, voluntary conservation practices with landowners that all address water quality. So we have different resource concerns that happen on watersheds or on farms. For this program, we focus just on that resource concern of water quality. This is through EPA, and so funding comes through EPA, but they kind of let each state handle it how they see best fit. Us within Ag and Forestry, we also kind of leave it more to that local level. We have a project oversight for this, but we work very closely with the locals to see how is this going to develop, so that way our main goal for the program, to have that watershed delisted and no longer impaired for turbidity, sedimentation, nitrogen, phosphorus, whatever they have for that impairment. So that is always our goal. We have 5-year projects within this program with goals that we have to meet that. If we do not have that impairment fixed by the end of that 5-year, there is always, or since I've been with it, always a severe decrease for those non-point source pollutions within there. We would give that watershed a few years because some of the practices we implement, it's not right away that we're going to see some of those water quality benefits. They do take a little bit of time, with the goal that these producers would also be continuing to implement some of those practices. So over time, we're going to have an idea over the next 3 to 5 years, what is the impairments now within that watershed. If it is not delisted, we go back into that area and try again to get it delisted until we get there. Like I said, this is voluntary program for 319. Conservation as a whole for landers is a voluntary program, or voluntary for them. The main goal we have with having these producers is we want them to have the most knowledge they have, or that they can get on what can they do to best utilize their natural resources while also helping their land. It's going to help the watershed, but it also helps them out, so it kind of benefits both sides of it. Would you like to hit on this one?
And thanks, Jerry. And this is the Ag Solid Waste Management Program. It actually started at the bequest of DEQ, Solid Waste. And I always found that surprising. They were making money on the permitting process as they would issue permits to these solid waste generators in managing solid waste. Then finally somebody said, this is back in like 92 or 3, why are we doing this? We could beneficially use that stuff. So it's written into the rule. It actually names the types of waste that are primarily used here. And you'll see those processors listed down here: rice dryers, grain elevators, cotton gins, seafood processors, ag and aquaculture producers and processors, arborists, vegetative storm debris contractors, and others, including pulp and paper mills. That waste is actually included in there. And I thought, well, that could be a toughie, but it's not one of the biggest, but it's got some of the most unique beneficial uses. That's another thing. By volume and by number of all the individual solid waste BMPs that we handle that are derived from all these processors is tree debris from arborists. My God, the volume is tremendous. And that grows even exponentially beyond that every time we have a hurricane, because when we're trying to deal with those veritable mountains of storm debris that becomes chipped, they're looking for ways to beneficially use it and how to store that, stage it on the landscape without causing a problem. It's a challenge, to say the least, but at the end of the day, without any of these wastes being burdened by the permitting process, DEQ's oversight never leaves. We can approve these individual BMPs, but we have to copy our approvals to DEQ Solid Waste. So they see everything that's going on here and want to make sure these processors, once we approve a BMP, are following them. And it runs the gamut, a lot of waste being beneficially used with no harm to the environment. It's the kind of thing we should have been doing a long, long time ago. And with advances made in grid sampling for better nutrient management on the landscape, these waste streams become especially useful there, and as an option or an alternative, rather, to commercial fertilizers. So it's a really good thing that we've got going here, and it's growing all the time. We don't charge for these BMPs. If we did, we'd be a wealthy agency. But we don't have the statutory authority to do that, so we don't. We do it for free. And it's a really big program, and a lot of water quality benefit is derived from what we do here. Coastal Vegetative Planning Program. And again, it's what brought me here when the program was in its infancy in its current form. It began in 1988. Then the Department of Natural Resources Coastal Restoration Division had the statutory responsibility to help coastal landowners with coastal stability and restoration. Revegetation as an element of that was still fairly new. A fellow by the name of Dr. Bill Good and a recent retiree from that agency, Kenneth Ballinger, began the program, developed some of the early techniques working with the Soil Conservation Service, now the NRCS, through the Golden Meadow Plant Material Center. It's still down there, y'all go visit. They developed the coastal cultivars that we use for coastal revegetation through this program. And coastal restoration is the intention, the primary intention of this. But a lot of people lose sight of the water quality benefits that are derived from this. Whether you're looking at 319 or any other program, there's always multiple and oftentimes off-site benefits that are in addition to the intended ones. Here, coastal restoration, but we do a lot of water quality. There are a lot of water quality benefits derived from this. In nutrient assimilation and turbidity reduction. If you create hedges of giant bulrush in an area of open water, you're breaking up fetch, turbidity begins to fall out, begins to flock out. Sunlight is hitting the marsh floor where it may not have previously. You begin to get submerged aquatics, hopefully native ones, that proliferate there that go even further to induce water quality and reduce turbidity and suspended sediments and assimilate nutrients and lower the TDS problem all around. Those yellow dots are the number and locations of vegetative plantings that have been conducted over the years up until this is 2020. A lot of work's gone into that. It was Department of Natural Resources Coastal Restoration Division that became Office of Coastal Protection and Restoration, and now is the CPRA. OCPR to CPRA, and they're still very supportive of the program and continue to fund it. And it's working in the same way that it did before. Very cost effective. We plant anywhere from 37 to 40 linear miles of vegetation anywhere between the Sabine River and the Pearl every year for a cost of less than $500,000. You're not going to do that in the private sector anywhere.
Question, so is that state-run, CPRA state-run, or is it, I thought?
CPRA is state, or you're thinking of QIPRA, Coastal Wetland Plant, that's federal. CPRA, Coastal Planning and Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, is state. That is correct. Prescribed burning. A lot of Louisiana, especially what you saw in Area 4, essentially the Acadiana region of South Louisiana, was historically grassland. Going into what some of us call low prairie or high marsh, I'd say based on soils, it's more accurately described as low prairie that is seasonally flooded. Prescribed burning is part of what that ecology evolved from. Of course, it was intermittent seasonal grazing from large ungulates, which we can begin to sort of biomimic with prescribed burning and prescribed grazing. Comes pretty close. If you bring prescribed grazing into an area that's been without it for sometimes decades, you'll begin to see what looks like vertical accretion. What's happening is you're building tremendous below ground biomass that hasn't existed since those old native perennials were lost due to lack of prescribed burning. When you do that, you're building soil organic matter, true soil organic matter, true soil humus. And when you build that, you're creating nutrient retention and a massive watershed scale potential to retain water. And at a watershed scale, Huck 12 or bigger, that potential is massive. There's watershed management and floodplain management benefits to be derived from that. Prescribed burning in some of these locales gets us there, and it's a very, very measurable effect that, at least in my division, the Office of Soil and Water Conservation, we certify prescribed burn managers for marshland prescribed burning and agricultural, which includes range and grassland. Timber here is done by the Office of Forestry. But there can be, it's not the primary focus, but can be a water quality and quantity benefit from this, yes.
When you're certifying people, who are these people that are usually doing this? Is it in the realm of their job or in the realm of like an individual who owns land?
Both. We have contractors, usually environmental consultants, who want to learn how to do this and do it properly to be able to do it for their clients, and others are individuals who just want to know how to do it and do it right. Master Farmer certification. This was an indirect response to the Gulf hypoxia issue. A lot of fingers were being pointed at agriculture, mostly upstate, the I and O states north of us, but the point is, a lot of interest here in Louisiana began to well up, saying farmers want to do the right thing. How do we show that? Took a lot of conversations, a lot of meetings, and anyway, the Louisiana Master Farmer Certification Program was developed. The early parts of it, phase 1, 6 hours of classroom instruction, and I know you're thinking, how on earth do you get a farmer, much less a room full of them, to sit down for 6 hours of instruction? They come to it, they do. Then beyond that, they have to attend an on-site conservation field day, usually on what's already been pre-approved as a model farm, a farm where conservation is being implemented in every way possible. Then phase 3 is full-scale implementation of a resource management system conservation plan on their whole farm. It's as difficult to do as it is to say. It's very pricey, it's hard. It takes many farmers many years to get that fully implemented. Once they've completed all 3 phases, they become certified as a master farmer. Certification is good for 5 years. There's continuing ed credits that the LSU Ag Center keeps track of to make sure they're doing this so that they can be recertified after 5 years. To date, I think there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 310 producers statewide that have been fully certified. There's probably, it's in the thousands, probably between 3,000 and 4,000 that have completed phases 1 and 2. Those are relatively easy. It's getting that RMS level conservation plan fully implemented that's the toughie. And these are some of the primary master farmer partners that help make the program happen. Some of our outreach, obviously, is Louisiana Master Farmer is a big one. Louisiana Project Wet. Yours truly was the Project Wet State Coordinator for many years in the state. It was a tough one to handle off. Healthy Water, Healthy People is a lot like Project Wet, but more geared toward high school and collegiate level instruction. Soil and Water Stewardship is something the National Association of Conservation Districts makes available. Used to be through the state soil and water conservation district programs. Now it's to anybody who can log onto their website and access their information. No matter the theme of the stewardship program, and the theme is revised annually, it's a theme very easy for conservation districts with our help to bend back toward water and water quality and non-point source protection. And locally led conservation, each of the 44 conservation districts every year has a stakeholder meeting. They pretty much say, if you're interested in conservation, come to the meeting, tell us your thoughts, we'll put them on the board, get a local work group together to prioritize them and try to bend funding and opportunity to address those needs. Farm Bill Conservation Program Delivery Assistance. In every Farm Bill is a conservation title, and it funds the programs called Environmental Quality Incentives Program, Conservation Stewardship Program, and others. And we in the conservation districts play a role in helping to administer that and in these ways. Watershed technicians, program contract support, general program assistance, and in-field Farm Bill conservation technicians. Wonderful program right here, the Small Watershed Program, and I'm going to let Mr. Davenport cover that one as well.
So this Small Watershed Program, PL 566, is Public Law 83-566. We just call it PL 566. It's very easy. The full title of it, extremely long. Moral of this program: small scale watershed flood prevention and watershed protection. Those are the main goals of this program. With this program, it is administered by NRCS, so Natural Resource Conservation Service. That funding is given to the local level for them to either hire out a contractor or work with the technical assistance they have at the local NRCS level to develop a watershed plan. These watershed plans, like I said, small watershed plans, 250,000 acres or less. I know that seems like a lot, but in the grand scheme of it, that's pretty small. We work on a HUC 12 level, so that's a hydrologic unit code. That is like a watershed, an area of land that water's all flowing similarly in that land. And so we will work on somewhere between 1 and 3 HUC 12s. We currently have about 30 projects in the state. We're working on trying to get our first one into engineering and design and construction for that project. Most of them right now are in planning, or they're in the preliminary investigative feasibility report phase of it, just to make sure that everything that we want to do for that project is feasible. So flood prevention is our main purpose for this one. So we're trying to prevent flooding for ag lands, for landowners, roads, schools, just the entire watershed, and it's entire watershed scale. So it's not like we're going to focus on one little piece within here. We're going to look as the entire watershed as a whole, and not just the data that we currently have. We also get historic data from landowners on what has this watershed looked like, what has it turned into in the past 10, 20, 50 years, to get an understanding of how its flow changed, whether from environmental changes or stuff that we as people have changed within that watershed landscape. main goal, like I said, the flood prevention. Another primary goal we have is water quality. With there, most of the time what we do for water quality is those conservation practices on farmland like we do for 319 or they do through EQIP or CSP. But there are other items that we could include in there. We work with landowners to get that idea of what's happening within that watershed, and then we get the technical assistance from the private industry or from NRCS on how can we best address this. What gives us the most bang for our buck, so that way we're no longer having, that very murky water come out where it used to be clear, or we have areas that are just drying up, and it used to be, I used to go swimming in there, I used to go fishing in there when I was a kid. Now there's hardly ever any water. And that's actually a project we have in Point Capee right now, reestablishing flow into an area that has pretty much been decimated because of environmental issues and sedimentation that have happened throughout there. So that's the aquatic habitat that are through there. So trying to reintroduce fresh water into areas that haven't been through there. With this program, we come up with 4 different alternatives, kind of figured out what we're going to do. Our first one, no alternative. If we didn't do anything, how are people going to be affected? How is the landscape going to be affected from flooding or from water quality issues? After that, we're going to look at a structural option, a non-structural option, and the final option they call pie in the sky. If regulations were an issue, if financial pieces were not an issue, what is everything we want to do to make this a perfect watershed where we had no water quality issues, no flooding issues? We go through there, we see what the benefit is, we see what the cost is, try to see what's the best option for us to move forward on there. And I'm very much hoping that y'all will be hearing more about this program once we get into engineering, design, and construction. 3 key areas right now, one of them in Vermilion Parish, another in Point Capee Parish, and the final one being in Iberia Parish. But we do have these projects throughout the state. They're actually throughout the nation. This is an older program. This has come back from the, 1940s, 1950s when it started. Funding had kind of dried up on the federal level back in early, mid-2000s. Federal funding had started to flow back through. With everything happening with the federal government right now, this program for this federal fiscal year actually tripled in funding from last year, showing that the people on the land talking to their legislators saying, this is something that has helped me or will help me. We need more funding to get this going. Us in Louisiana, we're very much hoping that some of those funds do come here so that way we can improve our watersheds. I'll let you take over from this piece of it.
Sure, and this right here is just sort of a hodgepodge of everything that's left over. Regional Conservation Partnership Program, that was an initiative that came out of I don't remember which farm bill, but it was in 2014. And our division applied for this, fallow and derelict rice land enhancement. In rice country of Southwest Louisiana many years ago, rice prices went really, really down in the 70s. A lot of that farmland was abandoned. And it since has become overgrown in tallow trees and other undesirables. What once was prairie, all the dynamics, all the processes that had maintained it as prairie pretty much ended when the rice ag ended. And that was an effort to try to reclaim the historic grassland values of some of that. And it was a tough row to hoe, and landowners were immensely interested, mostly scared of the Corps. So we came down here to the Corps office and got them to agree to don't hit anybody over the head for working in the name of this project. And they agreed. We got that in writing from them. But still very expensive practices to make happen. So we didn't get as much done through that program as we wanted, but people saw it. And now that kind of thing has become more of a conservation priority where it hadn't been. Rice stewardship does the same thing.
Before you move on to a new one, so with that enhancement money that you got, I'm trying to wrap my head around the project. Did you all went in and restored the land back to prairie? Is that what happened?
Grassland, correct.
And back into grassland.
Yes. And, as mentioned earlier in the prescribed burning slide, those historic processes that grassland ecology not only evolved, well, essentially was maintained by, was that frequent tandem of fire and grazing. We historically had large ungulates that migrated from up north down here and spent seasons on our coast to migrate back. Well, we lost that centuries ago, and we're more fire controlled now. But once the grassland is retained, it can be maintained through those processes, prescribed grazing, prescribed burning. And that's all we were trying to do there. You've just got to help the landowner get there by getting the invasive woodies out. Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, we focused that in some areas of highly erodible soil up on the Macon Ridge in North Louisiana, very successful there. Feral swine surveillance and management, no matter where you are, you're very near feral swine problems. And our emphasis was to help landowners deal with feral swine damages. That means removing hogs from the landscape. And our measure of success was not necessarily the number of hogs that the districts removed, but the measured reduction in damages from hogs that the landowners reported to us. And it was very favorable. That funding ended with the 2018 Farm Bill. It was a 5-year program, and we hit the dead end mark last September. We're hoping the next Farm Bill lets us do more of that. And through Gulf of America, Gulf of Mexico, whatever you want to call it, I still call it GOMA. It's been that for so many years. They partnered directly with the Conservation District, didn't have to come through us. The Morehouse SWCD, way up there, always a water quality priority area, to do some nutrient reduction practices with farmers in that area. Very successful project going on right now, mainly in those two little Huck 12s that Jerry talked about earlier, Bayou Galleon and Bayou Coulee. And so those are just some other things that sort of wrap up all of our conservation business and the practices that are used in all of these programs. This is not an all-inclusive list. This is just a brief mention of the primary, the most commonly used conservation practices. Water quality and agricultural sustainability by whatever measure or the focus, obviously, for most of these programs that we talked about, many of them. But I'd like to reiterate, there are so many multiple benefits of all these conservation practices, whether it's increased soil organic matter, improved wildlife habitat, improved water quality, any number of things. There's been a lot of talk in the recent 5 or 10 years about nature-based solutions. Everybody's biting into it, and I like it. If you look at the practices that are defined and spec'd out in the NRCS Field Office Technical Guide, like they have been since the late 30s and early 40s, they are nature-based solutions. They offer many, many multiple conservation benefits. It's a challenge getting landowners to get this done voluntarily. It can be a bigger challenge getting them to voluntarily maintain it over time. But you will see those family farms that have been doing this over time see the benefit to them, the benefit to their surrounding watershed. It means something to them. And these are the kind of practices that help make it happen. And y'all, that's all we've got.
Thank you. So now, you all want to just take the
Yes.
seats right there, and we'll let the camera go to you. And I'll sit here and just ask questions so I'm off camera. See that strategy? You want to ask your first question?
Sure.
All right, go for it.
So all of these projects that you're describing include aspects of science, they include aspects of natural sciences, social sciences, humanities. So basically what all of our students are interested in studying here and then faculty are interested in as well. So I'm curious, you mentioned all the projects are in partnership with farmers. Do you ever partner with universities and in particular students? Do you take on interns so that they can come and get experience doing what they're learning about in their classes?
Yes and no. Interns, we have limited capacity for, so what we try to do is generate funds to hire them as technicians, workers, even if part-time. And there's opportunity there where we don't draw much attention to ourselves anymore because we can't pay as much. We don't compete well in the job market. But the short answer is yes. Universities as a whole, back in the Project Wet days, those pre-service workshops, working with methods professors, professors in any section within that university that would be interesting in teaching formal or non-formal educators to be how to incorporate these conservation curriculum supplements into whatever they did, however they interfaced with the public. There was a strong benefit to that. And in our former days, that was bigger business, but little by little we lost out to technology, and that's understandable. That's all fine. You know, that's a common trend. And universities are still very involved in some of the research that they do. They'll see watershed work that we'll be aiming toward with one of Jerry's watershed PL 566 projects. For instance, we'll get somebody, a university professor that's interested in translocation rates of the predominant vegetation in those watersheds. Well, like, we don't have the capacity for that, but you come on and get alongside us in this project and do it. And we can benefit from the data that are generated from there. Water quality monitoring, universities often function under their own quality assurance programs and have that in place, so it stands to reason that we would partner with universities where available near some of our priority areas to get water quality monitoring done there.
And is the greater New Orleans part of your priority area?
Well, right now, from an ag perspective, there may be many water quality problems here, but not many that are said to be induced by ag, and that's not our call. We have to look at what's called the 303D list that's maintained by DEQ, and it's their ambient monitoring that determines where these impairments occur and where they don't, and what the suspected causes are. When we see ag as a suspected cause, and we can get some conservation bang for the very limited bucks that we get, we work with DEQ to create a watershed implementation plan to go there. So now and then, yes, but for the most part, it's in those row crop heavier and grazing heavier areas.
You mentioned when you were talking about the Louisiana master farmer, you had something like 3,000 plus applicants, but they got some matter of steps through the process, but only about 300, so it's like less than 10% completion. Can you speak a little bit about, is it like the classic education versus implementation gap? Like, what are the main barriers to completion, and what could improve the completion of that program?
Dollars and time. It's basically that. It's maintaining conservation practices. To get an RMS level plan approved for your whole farm, it's massive and it's expensive and it's very time consuming. If you need terraces or land grading to reduce the erosion by limiting the slope that your runoff is coming across, that's a very costly practice. And you're creating massive soil disturbance to do that you overcome in the generations to follow once that practice is done. But it's got to be planned out and done oftentimes incrementally and as that producer can afford it. And that's just an example. It's a hard thing to get done. They all want to, and there are benefits, sometimes marketing benefits, sometimes farm insurance benefits that they can derive from that certification. They want it badly. It's just very unaffordable. And I don't know if you keep track of ag markets in the news. Times aren't good right now. You know, we're heading into some iffy times for ag. So not getting any easier. And it makes these conservation cost share funds that come through the conservation title of the Farm Bill all that more important, and Jerry's 319, for them to be able to cost share the practices that help get them there. I hope that answered your question.
I want to take a step back and just talk a little about each of you individually too. Just kind of, what was your educational background, like academic education or your professional training, that kind of led you to the position that you're in now?
I'll start with it. So I went to LSU for animal science degree. My plan was to be a vet. Along the way, it changed a lot of what I wanted to do. I had no clue. I had missed one of my classes that I did not know was a spring or a fall only class. And so talking with my professor, I wanted to graduate on time. She was very understanding and let me change one of my classes to a non-point source pollution seminar. And I had no clue what that was, had never heard about it before. I'm from New Orleans, did not grow up in ag as a farmer, concrete jungle where I'm at. From there, I still was not trying to get into conservation. I was just looking for a job. So I had applied for a few different offices and had accepted one with CPRA. Working with them, had started to learn a little bit more about conservation, and I really enjoyed the type of work I was doing. As a state employee, can get a lot more money in the private sector, but doing that, I enjoyed my work. I went to work, I didn't dread it, I had fun. I got to see some of the projects that we were actually doing, and so it made my work a little bit more meaningful. From there, wanted to kind of change to be a little bit more hands-on with work, had moved over to Ag and Forestry as an inspector, and then from there, they had a position open with Office of Soil and Water for water resources. Had not really worked, again, in the ag conservation realm, but thought, well, I'd try it, see if I enjoy it, and I absolutely love it. And then that led me to what I do today, and everything that I work on is all hands-on experience that I learned doing the job and researching as I didn't know things.
Makes me wish I was younger. You know, he's coming in and I'm going out, or need to be, I guess. But I went to McNeese State University. I'm from Southwest Louisiana, born in Creole, and grew up around grazing and rice agriculture. And I often saw how done right ag lent something to the landscape that wasn't there before. It wasn't just benign, it was particularly beneficial in those instances, and often wished for something, somebody, some way to work with landowners to get there. And I didn't know it, but conservation districts had been in existence since the 30s, and I just somehow fell into the lap of the whole thing. Thought I was going to work for the Soil Conservation Service when I took this job. Found out 2 weeks later, no, I actually work for the state. And what the hell are these soil and water conservation districts? Never heard of them. So like Jerry said, all I can do is reiterate it. My original college intent was marine biology, marine estuary science, always and still does interest me. Then ag business, and I thought, nope, I like range ecology. Again, the coastal prairie is that. It is range and what goes on there. And the nearest I could come to what I wanted was the wildlife management degree at McNeese at that time. It's what they did. And it's led to pretty great things that I could not have foreseen, pretty much like Jerry. Fell into the lap of a lot of good conservation work, and it never ends. I've been at it for 32 years. I'm in my 60s now, and you're always learning. Programs change, markets change, landowner attitudes change. You've got to move with them. So yeah, it stays interesting. It's never boring in the conservation world, that's for sure.
So I had a question about, because you've been doing it so long, changes in agriculturalists' attitudes. So basically, like, as you all are successful, that translates to knowledge on the part of farmers. So like, has the needle moved in terms of how much agriculturalists already know in relation to what you're teaching, like conservation and sustainability practices? Like, have you basically moved the needle in a positive direction?
Yes, I'd certainly say so, and it depends on ag commodity. You know, you've got cane country that you're nearest here, then you've got cattle country, and you've got timber silvopasture, if you will, sort of tandem timber and cattle production, then you got the rice crawfish areas. Within each of those, you've got very embedded cultural practices that people do things because that's how Paw did it and it's how we're going to keep doing it. And you don't just make them stop, even if you're showing them the writing on the wall. It's I really think in those regards, the carrot is much more effective than the stick. One is residue management in sugarcane. It's a hard thing to overcome because that residue has to be removed for proper soil warming, proper moisture reduction for that ratoon crop to emerge, and for a number of things. And they're getting better at it. They're learning how to manage that crop residue. And
Talking about bagasse?
no. Bagasse is the part of the milling process. We're talking about when you harvest the leaf residue that stays in the field. And the stuff the bagasse is made from is leaving the field. That residue is staying. They've got to get it off the row top so that that row top can dewater, dry out appropriately, warm up appropriately. But then you put all that residue management in the wheel furrow, which retains too much moisture. You can't get back in there the equipment. So the easiest answer to the problem is burn it. Cane is a grass. Cane responds to fire the same way these other grasses that we talked about earlier do too. But residue management does a lot of, it lends itself to conservation in a number of ways. One is increased soil organic matter that if you give them or create options through the research partnerships that we talked about, that they can begin to pilot, at least those who bite into it initially, the others are watching. And little by little, for the first time, we're hearing cane farmers on the lower Teche talk about cover crops and residue management. They've never used those words before. So yes, Then you've got the generational change. The old guys roll out, the grandsons come in, they start farming. Well, here's how we're going to do things. So I'm not saying there's a big reset, but sometimes you've got a little bit of work to do all over again there. And then markets shift. You get out of cane country and get to where rice could go either into cattle, soybeans, or something else, depending on markets. Those mean different practices. So you've got to be there for those landowners to help make those adjustments in the course of multiple seasons sometimes.
Sorry, I have a lot of questions, though. I didn't know, I did not anticipate this. So do either of y'all have anything to do with the rice that's being farmed in Louisiana that we had the contingency go to Cuba to try to help them with making it, is it less, to lower the carb? Oh, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. But it's something that LSU scientists are working on, but I think it's in connection with ag. I mean, it's got to be, some of the farmers.
A healthier rice
A healthier rice.
for human consumption?
Yes.
That sounds great, but that's not our thing.
not what
That's
I do.
LSU researchers would be doing that. Now, hey, if that rice variety did lend itself to certain cropping seasons or rotations that benefited conservation, then we'd step in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so if it's on private land, then or even if it is on private land, you all play a role in helping the farmers with the conservation aspects of it.
That's correct.
Because I'm pretty sure it is on private land that they're doing that work.
It probably would be, yeah.
Cool.
I was curious if either one of y'all were in any like horticulture, agriculture, or like FFA programs. I went to Sulphur, which is by McNeese, and I was involved in a lot of agriculture and horticulture programs there, so I was just curious if either of y'all were involved in middle school and high school that led to y'all's passion for what y'all did.
Short answer is yes. I'll let Jerry talk more about that.
No. I didn't know what FFA was. I didn't know what 4-H was. When I started school, I thought I was in the College of Science. Didn't know that there was a College of Agriculture. Not until I took Ag 101 did I learn more about agriculture, learning the statistics of just how much food we need to produce to be able to feed a growing population, along with farmers currently. The average age of a farmer, you would think would stay about the same, because as farmers get out, new farmers are coming in, but that is continuing to increase. Farmers are staying in longer and the next generation is not coming in. In Louisiana, we are mostly family farms, small family farms. There's other places that corporations are coming in, and it's this mega farm that that's what it is, a corporation coming through. And just saw that there was a need for that, but prior to that, absolutely not. Had no clue. I had a little garden at one point, but I did not have a green thumb.
But he knows now.
I do know now. Yep.
But yes, it's big business where we're from. I graduated Bell City High School. And so, yeah, if you went to school there, you rodeoed, ran track, and you were an FFA. Those were givens. That's what people did. It was a very rural, out-of-the-way place. And FFA provided a lot of opportunities, and 4-H was there too. I just went the FFA way. And it would be great if more young people outside of the agricultural areas knew about that, because it creates so much insight and realization of opportunity for young people. And I guess growing up where I did, it was an unfair advantage, because I got to see these processes and understand them. By the time I was in middle school, I'd worked in them. Sounds like child labor, and it was, but yeah, that was pretty common over there back then. But for so many inner city kids, they just don't get to see it, and there needs to be more opportunity there. And I think St. James Parish, and I saw you had a question, fast food farm, look that up whenever y'all get a chance. These kids don't get to see what's going on out there. And first thing they used to talk about was, what's your favorite dish? Pizza? What's your favorite pizza? They'd write it out. Every ingredient they knew of to be on and in that pizza. Here's everything that has to happen for you to get there, and here's how the landowners need to do it and do it right to keep that production going in a sustainable way. Blows these kids' mind, blows some adults' mind. So anyway, whatever we can do to create that opportunity, FFA and 4-H are certainly there, and there certainly needs to be stronger inroads made into the non-ag, less rural areas to create those opportunities. Good question.
I actually have two questions now. For the students who don't know what FFA is and or HR, could you just briefly tell us what these are?
Now, I'm not, well, 4-H is I'll let her explain it because she's been.
Development program that often is based in agriculture. I worked in their state office for 7 years. But it's actually youth development focused, but a lot of people do associate with agriculture because it's part of the extension programs and has a heavy role in developing youth through raising animals and showing them at fairs. So it has a heavy tradition of that. But actually the focus is on the youth versus FFA.
It's on youth too, but 4-H starts younger, like upper elementary, I think, at the earliest.
yeah.
FFA is high school. May have changed since then, Future Farmers of America, which is more ag-centric, I think, than 4-H is, but the principles are the same, and the kids are given opportunity to delve into certain topics in a very, very structured way. Teaches a lot about project management and development, public speaking, just all sorts of things. It's really wonderful things. Easy to look into. In Louisiana, you're probably going to find FFA chapters, at least a handful or several in almost every parish. Orleans, I don't know. But they're going to be near here. I bet St. Charles has some. They're going to be on the North Shore. St. Bernard maybe even. They're going to be near you. 4-H is all over the place. If you go to the LSU Ag Center's website, very accessible, or Southern Extension's website, I think you're going to see a lot of good 4-H information there, and you're going to find out who your parish contacts are, no matter where you are. But they're really wonderful things to be part of.
So my other question was on the small watershed program, and made me think of the Smitty's disaster. So how involved are you guys when disasters happen in a watershed area? Are you guys involved at all? Does it hit total reset for you?
So the PL56 Small Watershed Program, that one is going to be more of a long-term, so not necessarily immediate disaster relief or something. There's another program that we also, I kind of help with on there because I work with the NRCS staff so frequently. It's called EWP, that's Emergency Watershed Protection. That program, Louisiana is the #1 state in the nation for using that program, mostly after we have hurricane come through. Most of that is going to be clearing up waterways, so tree debris or other things that are clogging, causing flooding currently. Generally a very quick program. After those happen, that's where PL 566 could come in and then do the actual water quality and future flood benefit of looking at not just when a hurricane comes through, but a 100-year flood comes through. How can we try and divert water or be able to have increased drainage into our soils so that way we can try and reduce flooding happening within that watershed.
And do you consider those contaminated sites for that? So thinking of
Something for like
flooding
fourth meetings.
events, yeah, like how do you mitigate around that so it doesn't end up in the watershed?
That would probably fall more within DEQ's realm. If it was an ag-induced situation, or even not, in the Smitty's scenario, our department role was helping farmers. How were you affected and how do we overcome those effects? That's how we responded there. But just like Jerry said, you know, floods, fire. We had wildfires in Vernon and Beauregard Parish just 3 years ago. So much so that just in some of our steepest terrain and most erosive soils, we had no vegetation. So you get a little bit of a rain shower after that, you've got mass soil movement that's clogging, causing turbidity. What do we address that with, and how do we help the landowners do it? So there was that. And if you're involved and interested in water quality, that's a wonderful thing. And I know you've seen then, if you've had those interests for a while, being in South Louisiana, you're also familiar with flooding. And you've probably often seen or felt like water quality in Louisiana always takes a back seat to flood control. To me, PL 566 is a place where that is not so, or doesn't have to be. They come together. And if you look more into 566 or talk to Jerry on the side, you'll see or hear it blends well in many cases with LWI, the Louisiana Watershed Initiative, that wants a lot of the same things. These nature-based solutions. If we use these conservation practices in ag processes on and near some of these priority watershed areas, what is the watershed scale effect of 5 to 10 years of residue management, 5 to 10 years of nutrient management? There's a lot of things. We know they help, and we know how from an ag perspective, but a long-term watershed scale water quality and flood prevention perspective, we don't know. If Jerry's a row crop farmer in XYZ Huck 12, and he's 5th generation on that farm, they've never done residue management, but he started, and he's been doing it 5 years. Before he started, to measure his success, let's say his true soil organic matter measured in grid sampling throughout his farm was 0.6% soil organic matter within that root zone. And within 5 years, he got to 2.5 and 3%. That's massive on a watershed scale. We know that's going to help him retain more nutrients and a lot more water at every rainfall event, every irrigation event, which also means less runoff. How much less? How much did we improve this on a watershed scale? We're only now getting into the age of the computer models and the technology that can tell us that. So good times in conservation ahead. So the answer is yes, there are places we can mesh, and 566 is where a lot of these initiatives can certainly come together.
So is 566 more of a, you said you come in after these storms, but I just was reading to educate myself on that watershed, but it's really to like help build these watersheds and to help prevent the erosion.
Correct.
So, but it seems like
So that's why I say it's not going to be something,
reactive
yeah, it's not going to be something that we're coming in, a natural disaster happens, and we're going to come in with PL 566. We're going to look as long term for this. So we're going to be looking at this watershed on historically what has been happening, but also what can we do to improve this watershed for these events that could happen, so that way when it does happen, we now have a less of effect that's happening on us. So we get that hurricane or we get something that happens, some natural disaster that comes through, we are better off than we were if we would have just left it alone and then would have had to do something after the fact to fix it. We're kind of getting ahead of the game for it. And with it, we're looking at it on, like I said, a watershed scale, but on this modeling for H&H, hydraulic and hydrologic. While it's only on these small scales, we have hopefully so many of them, so many more even coming, that we'd be able to kind of combine those models to look at not just a small section, but a small section here, a small section here, a small section here, to create one large H&H model to understand maybe instead of a Huck 10 scale, we're looking at an entire river basin scale. Now that's going to take time. It's something that we're working on. It's something we want to get more into. But yes, the PL56, we're looking at long-term goals. We want this project or the benefits from these projects to not just go into 5 years. We're looking 50, 100 years down the road with these projects. Some of them even were done 50 years ago that are still providing benefits today. And so we're looking at, do we need to go in and do new improvements because of technology changes, research changes, just over time structures may have been degrading, and so how can we go in to make sure that this stays up to par or it becomes even better so that that system doesn't fail. And I'll also say for our 319 program, we are trying to look into it. EPA has been, we've been working on them with new types of projects with there for water quality. One of them is, how can we come in after a natural disaster and work on water quality? We are still trying to figure that out. That is just in the planning right now, but it's something that I'm very excited to look into to see, next time we have a natural disaster, what can we do, right? Helping with FEMA or doing something on the side that can improve water quality on there for landowners and for the watershed.
I'm going to be mindful of our time, so I'm going to do one final quick round of question is, what is maybe one skill that you have that is helping you in your current job, and what is one concept or skill that you wish we as an environment program were making sure to teach our students?
I would say a skill that I have that helps out a lot, communication, right? We all, if we stay separated and we just work on our own things, then could we get a job done? Yes. But could we do the best that we could do? No. And it's not just communication on this large scale. It does help on that large scale, but it's you and me talking to each other, me talking to a producer, that producer goes and talks to other people, and then also on that larger scale of outreach, of reaching everybody. That's one of the things I would say the number one thing we're trying to improve on is our education and outreach. So that way, general public knows what we're doing, and I say we as in our conservation districts, so that way people know who they are and the benefit that they provide. With that, we can also hear from y'all to understand what do y'all need, so that way we're able to address those needs. If we don't ever hear from the public, then I'm just going based off of what I know. But who am I to say that that's the best for an area? I don't live in most of these areas. I live in Livingston and I'm from New Orleans. Those are the two areas I know. The rest of the state, don't. So communication, number one thing. And I would say it's on the same side of what I wish y'all would have the most with too, is communication and understanding of agriculture. We talked about agriculture, that it is an issue for pollution, but at the same time, the things that we're doing to address environmental issues are there. I think a lot of people don't understand that with ag. They point to ag and say, you're the problem. If we didn't have agriculture, then our environment would be great. If we didn't have agriculture, none of us would be alive. We have to have food to eat. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're also doing the best for our natural resources, because if we don't, then that hurts us as a farmer. If you can't grow the most amount of food, high quality food as possible, then you're not going to make as much money, and then we don't have enough food to feed people. The only way that's going to happen is you have to take care of the land that you're on and the water quality, because that's what you're irrigating your crops with. If we don't have that, we turn into, I'm not going to name countries, but other countries that they don't have the same tonnage or bushels that are coming out of this land, and they're having to constantly import food, and it costs a lot, and that's also a giant security thing too when you talk about on a national level of interacting with other countries.
And I'd like to add to all the communication points that Jerry just made is that if you notch this up and take it into your professional lives, if you look at the partners that are involved in conservation, specifically in Master Farmer, and the level of really close interaction it takes to make programs like that happen and to stay effective over time, and for landowners to see that and feel like they're putting something into this and I'm going to respond, communication is important. You're not going to get along with those people, but you've got to work together. And one of the reasons, I'll go ahead and say this, that I believe a lot of the other states, none of the other states, to my knowledge, have something that equates master farmers, because they've not come together to work together to the extent that it takes to make a program like that happen. So yeah, communication and working together, the give and take, it's very important. Learn all you can about soils in the midst of all that communication. If you're interested in the environment and conservation, a lot of people are. They want to learn about animals and crops and trees and soils. Blah. I mean, it goes flat. That's where it all begins. You've got to know soils. Very important. And communicate.